Welcome to the first edition of the Quality Calculator, where we used objective, scientific, and mathematic methods to create artificial intelligence perfectly suited to evaluate any form of media. This time around, the Quality Calculator completed a deep examination of Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. Unfortunately, we had to leave out the future-connected side story in order to avoid overloading the calculator's precious processing power. Before we go any further, I would like to inform you that the Quality Calculator is fueled in large part with likes and subscriptions. So if you would like to see more, please like and subscribe now. Stick around until the end to find out what the calculator gave Xenoblade Chronicles. I'm Senate here to present the calculator's findings. In terms of gameplay, Xenoblade Chronicles provides a fresh take on JRPG combat. It functions like a compromise between the laid-back, turn-based combat and complete action combat from other RPGs. It's pretty simple on a base level. Walk up to an enemy that you've targeted, and your character will begin auto-attacking. Then you can choose an art from the bottom menu, and your character will perform the designated action and put that art on a cooldown. The variety of arts make each character feel unique. It gives them a distinct playstyle, and one that matches their personality and physical characteristics. Ryan's arts, for example, lend him better towards tanking, or dealing large amounts of physical damage. Melee, on the other hand, has no art suited towards tanking, and very few for physical damage, but lots that deal ether damage and support her team. You can have up to 3 party members deployed at once, with the other 2 being controlled by the AI, for better and for worse. On one hand, this allows the player to have multiple party members deployed, like a turn-based RPG, but it doesn't force them to micromanage all of them. However, the AI can be atrocious at times, especially for Melia and Shulk, where the AI will almost never use the right art at the right time. In keeping with JRPG tradition, Xenoblade Chronicles features a host of progression systems. They include leveling up, equipment, art levels, and skill trees. All of these systems are pretty standard for an RPG, but for good reason. They offer a variety of ways to customize any given party member and visually see the progress that both the player and the characters make throughout the game. Something like higher damage numbers not only gives the player the feeling of improvement, but also conveys the progress the characters are making along the way. These progression systems may not be unique, but they are a pretty good example of the old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The best part of Xenoblade Chronicles gameplay isn't even the gameplay itself, though. It's the way the gameplay integrates with the story, which is most obvious with the vision system. We'll get more into the story significance of visions later, but for now, the vision system gives the player a warning of a dangerous attack that will occur in the near future, and the opportunity to stop it. They can either warn a party member, which uses 1/3 of the party meter, giving the player the ability to choose one of the arts on the warned party member, or if they're playing as Shulk, they can use one of the Monado arts. The most notable are Monado Shield, which can be used to block talent arts, provided it is the same level or one higher as the incoming art, and Monado Speed, which grants a party member a guaranteed chance to dodge all physical attacks for a period of time. Out of combat, it can let the player know if an item they recently picked up will be used for a quest later on, and marks them with a light blue exclamation point in the inventory screen. Visions aren't the only gameplay element that match with the story. Chain attacks also integrate the game's themes. If you have a full party meter, then you can initiate a chain attack. All party members are guaranteed to attack at least once, and there's a chance of getting a QTE prompt to extend the chain attack after the third party member attacks. This will continue until the player fails a QTE or they don't receive one. The attack requires everyone to participate, and Strong Infinity increases the likelihood of getting a chain link, which is a way the game demonstrates the importance of bonds within the world of Xenoblade, just like the story emphasizes it. On the topic of Xenoblade's narrative, we've come far enough without discussing it. The story is, after all, the central component of the game. Xenoblade Chronicles is excellent. It may even change the way you look at the world. That's not to say it's perfect, but we'll get to that. Xenoblade Chronicles is fundamentally a Chosen One narrative. However, it subverts this typical story arc. At the very beginning of Chapter 3, Shulk recalls an event from 14 years prior, the discovery of the Monado, where Shulk is the only survivor from it. The only survivor from a tragic event is a pretty common setup for a Chosen One story, the most famous of which is likely The Boy Who Lived, aka Harry Potter, but unlike Harry Potter, being the Chosen One in this narrative is not a particularly brave or honorable thing. Furthermore, also unlike Harry Potter, Most Chosen One stories have a prophecy, and there is no prophecy in this narrative. Shulk's destiny is not revealed until the very end of the story. In a twist to the game's constant talk about changing the future, being chosen by Zanza actually predestined Shulk's fate. As Zanza himself puts it, Shulk had already died along with his parents and had merely become a vessel for Zanza. This reveal is one of Xenoblade Chronicles' greatest plot twists, and the way it and the other twists in the game are handled are indicative of its quality. Where many games, even good ones like Persona 5 and Fire Emblem Awakening, backload their plot twists to the end of the story, leading to narrative whiplash and exposition-heavy endings, Xenoblade Chronicles chooses to spread them out. That's not to say that the game's ending isn't narrative-heavy, it's just less so than most JRPGs with similarly grand stories. The narrative whiplash is also reduced by the addition of extensive foreshadowing. Foreshadowing seems like a natural addition to a game focused on a main character that can see into the future, and it fits just as well as it would seem. Before looking at the foreshadowing, it is important to consider how foreshadowing comes across without knowing what is being foreshadowed. When first playing the game, the calculator notes that the player will have a distinct and constant feeling that something more is going on. But despite the pressing knowledge of something larger, they won't be able to figure out exactly what the twist, or rather twists, were. Sometimes the player can get a vague sense of what is going to happen, but never something specific. Yet this awareness of something going on mirrors that of Shulk. When Shulk sees a vision, it is merely bits and pieces of an event in the future. It's never enough to discern exactly what will occur and exactly how to change it, but it is enough to tell him that he needs to be on his guard. This also matches with the vision mechanic, although in combat the visions are significantly shorter term than in the story. Some foreshadowing is more obvious, like with Dixon, who can often be spotted in the cutscenes which bookend each chapter, making an out-of-place remark or doing something suspicious. The game clearly lets the player know that there's more going on behind the scenes, but doesn't tell them enough to deduce exactly what Dixon is planning. By the time Dixon betrays Shulk, the player has been given more than enough information to deduce that he will do that. However, the interesting part, his motivations, remain concealed. The information given about Zanza is intentionally cryptic enough to prevent a player from figuring out exactly what Dixon's relationship to him is. Even more impressive is the way that this particular foreshadowing fits with Dixon's personality. He is a more dramatic person who speaks directly to the party member throughout the game. As such, it makes sense that he is presented that way, even when the party can't see him, and he is basically only speaking to himself. But the way Xenoblade introduces its more subtle foreshadowing is even more interesting. Take Alvis as an example. He has a very refined and flawless manner of speaking. Later, it's revealed that Alvis is really the computer that Klaus used to recreate the universe. With that knowledge, his strikingly inhuman speaking patterns make a lot more sense. While this isn't strictly foreshadowing in the sense that it directly warns of upcoming events, it is a hint to one of the game's final and biggest reveals that remains consistent ever since Shulk meets Alvis in Chapter 7. Xenoblade Chronicles also does this incredible thing that many elementary school teachers tell their students to do. But it's often forgotten by many authors of games. You may have heard of it before. It's called Show Don't Tell. Many games' narratives are bogged down by exposition-heavy world building, but Xenoblade Chronicles isn't. The most interesting way Xenoblade displays this world building style is through the shocked reaction, or lack thereof, by the game's characters. Take the way the properties of the Mechon are introduced. In the prologue, it is revealed that the Mechon can only be harmed by the Monado or other weapons enchanted by it. Early in the first chapter, the player learns through the incident with Rhine in the laboratory that the Monado cannot harm Homs. In the very next chapter, the party encounters the first Mechon that cannot be harmed by the Monado, Metal Face, much to the surprise of Shulk, Rhine, and Dunban. If the two events were not separated by the journey through Tephra Cave and return to Colony 9, more players would notice the connection between the fact that the Monado cannot injure Homs and the fact that Metal Face could not be harmed by it. Continuing with the topic of the faced Mechon, when Zord first opens his metallic mouth at the end of Chapter 4, the party members, at this point Shulk, Rhine, and Charla, are shocked. They had always believed that the Mechon were completely inhuman creations, with no free will of their own, and completely at the behest of some unknown authority. but the fact that there are Mechon that speak in a distinctly human, or rather Homs, manner, upsets that assumption. Zord speaks with so much emotion that if his physical appearance didn't indicate otherwise would suggest that he is fully human. He taunts the party members, threatens them, and even laughs. All of this helps hint towards one of the game's biggest reveals. But first, let's take a look at how the party members defeat Zord. It begins with Atharan's exclamation, "Let's see how you survive an ether river," suggesting that the liquid ether is incredibly dangerous without ever directly saying that. This understanding further helps outline the strength of the face Mechon when Zord returns to confront the party members on the elevator out. The party is once again surprised, but Zord's body is obviously weakened by the ether, yet it's not completely destroyed. It leaves the idea that the ether river is incredibly strong, but that the face Mechon are stronger. Back to the face Mechon speaking. The scene that follows the confrontation with Zord helps the player and the characters generalize the trait to all the faced Mechon. The fact that Metal Face can also speak suggests that Zord's ability was not merely a fluke, but rather a trait of all the faced Mechon. By the time we reach the end of Chapter 9 with the fight on Prison Island and realize that all the faces are piloted by Homs, the player has been given more than enough information to draw this conclusion independently. The fact that the face Mechon can speak the same language and in the same manner as Homs, combined with the fact that the Monado cannot harm them just like Homs, sets up this reveal. With all the praises offered by the quality calculator, I wouldn't blame you for forgetting that I said that Xenoblade Chronicles wasn't perfect. The calculator noted a few major flaws with the game that we should go over now. The first issue with the game is that it's hopelessly unbalanced. One of the combat's central mechanics is the break, topple, daze system, and it's also one of the most broken. It's pretty simple. You can break an enemy's balance with a pink art, topple them with a green art, and then use a yellow art to daze them. You can use this system to trivialize any post-game superboss, but even halfway through the game, the player will have the ability to keep most enemies from retaliating with relative frequency. While that might seem bad, it actually isn't the worst part of the game's balancing. That is actually Charla. She is the worst party member in the game by far. Like, it's not even close. All she can do is heal. She has very few damaging arts, no topple arts, and a talent art that literally does nothing but makes her worse. Her talent art, Cool Off, fills up whenever she uses another art. What does it do when you fill it up, you may ask? Well, it forces Charla to stand still and do nothing but let heat out of her rifle. And it cancels any aura she has active. Unlike every other talent art in the game, it is strictly a downgrade to her kit. It does literally nothing to benefit her and so much to harm her. Xenoblade Chronicles features over 480 side quests, by which I mean there are 3 types of side quests repeated dozens upon dozens of times. There are battle quests, collect quests, and chore quests. It's nice that a struggling player can use the abundance of side quests to catch up, but the calculator notes that the game would be significantly improved if there were a few high-quality side quests instead of the abundance of overall mediocre or outright bad ones. The developers are obviously capable of developing good side quests, but there's no way to distinguish these actually interesting side quests from the heaps of boring, uninspired trash. They all look the same on the minimap and in the quest log. These improved quests aren't anything revolutionary. They never make you do something out of the ordinary. But it is the narrative that comes as a part of the quest that makes them at least somewhat interesting. One example of this design is a quest chain in Colony 9, called Biscuits for a Grandson. It starts at the very beginning of the game. You can speak to an old woman named Marcia, and she'll ask you to deliver biscuits to her grandson, Hirake, so he can win a fight against his adopted older brother, a Nopon named Zukazu. But you aren't told why the two are going to fight, and don't find out unless you return to Colony 9 after befriending Ricky. Then you find that 2 quests are available, one from Zukazook and one from Hirake. If you complete one of these quests, then the other one and subsequent quests will disappear. Both have the same setup. Zukazook wants to leave Colony 9 and explore the Bionis, but his brother thinks that it is too dangerous for him. So both of them ask you to gather a red pollen orb, which is an illegal substance that gives whoever consumes it a burst of energy, in order to guarantee their respective victory. Let's talk about Zukazu's side first. If you give him the red pollen orb, then he wins the fight and Hirake lets him journey into the Bionis. You can actually find him on the Bionis' leg after the quest. Hirake, meanwhile, awaits his brother's return and decides to prepare his room for him. You can help him gather some supplies, and he promises that when his brother returns to Colony 9, his room will be spotless. If you choose to give Hirake the pollen orb, he obviously wins the fight, and Zukazu stays in Colony 9 with his brother. He lives a happy life in the colony, except for his relationship with his grandmother, Marcia, who harbors prejudice against Nopon. He decides that if he can give her the materials for her biscuits and return her old ring to her, then maybe the two can get along. If you follow through, then the two end up reconciling in a really touching ending. If only more quests in the game were like this. None of the gameplay actions were complicated or even particularly interesting throughout the quest, but the narrative behind it was compelling enough to make the player want to complete it, beyond the material incentives of gold, experience, and items. There are other quests like this, but even going out of the way to find them, the calculator could only find a handful of them at most. But all of the issues mentioned earlier are fairly common, and not super major. Despite all the praises of the plot from earlier, the quality calculator's main objection to Xenoblade Chronicles actually comes from the narrative. Shulk's triumphant exclamation of creating a world with no need for gods encapsulates Xenoblade's overall positive message. He wants a world where people are free to choose for themselves, and he even forgives Egil for trying to kill everyone on Bionis. It's a remarkable expression of human empathy. However, the game's main antagonist, Zanza, demonstrates a folly in his reasoning. Simply put, Zanza, or rather Klaus's freedom, results in the destruction of the entire universe. He recreates the universe as an individual before he was a god. This not only demonstrates that people are imperfect and capable of being corrupted by power, but that one person can ruin everything. In this case, Xenoblade's universe is destroyed by one misguided individual who was free to do as he pleased. While Xenoblade Chronicles' gameplay and overall narrative is compelling, this major issue with the game's messaging combined with the repetitive side quests and somewhat poor balancing hold the game back from perfection. But that doesn't mean it's not a masterpiece. In the end, the quality calculator, in its infinite wisdom, gave Xenoblade Chronicles a 9 out of 10. Thank you for watching the quality calculator's findings. I'm sure the quality calculator's cold, metallic, central processing unit would be warmed if you could like and subscribe. Thanks again.